Hello everybody, I hope you're well. If you have spent any time on Twitter or TikTok, you may notice the widespread mockery of these two celebrities, Brooklyn Beckham and Tom Felton. Brooklyn Beckham is the son of David and Victoria Beckham. He recently married billionaire heiress and actress Nicola Peltz and has been widely mocked online for not only changing his career path often, but not really excelling at any of them, which seems to sharply juxtapose his parents, one who is a world famous football player, the other one the part of one of the most iconic bands of the last 30 years, who has made a very successful pivot into high fashion. Tom Felton skyrocketed to fame at just 12 years old, playing Draco Malfoy in the Harry Potter series, and he has recently become the first actor of the series to reprise his role. He got cast as Draco in the Cursed Child play on Broadway, and he is often ridiculed online for not being able to let Harry Potter go. Girl, move on. And despite Brooklyn Beckham and Tom Felton seeming pretty different from the outside, one being a nepo baby, the other a child star, I think both of them have been cursed with what I have called visible irrelevance. Both were thrust into fame as children, and now when trying to, and sometimes failing, to branch out in their careers, because there are already so many eyes on them from when they became famous as children, they fail in front of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, who are ready to point and laugh at them at any given point. Nepo baby discourse has been such a contentious part of cultural conversation for a few years now. And of course, I'm going to try and cover all angles and perspectives, but I thought it would be interesting to discuss the real drawbacks of either being born into fame or becoming famous at a very young age. And obviously, I'm going to put a disclaimer at the beginning of this video because I understand why people are going to be rolling their eyes, why people are going to be getting out their world's smallest violin. I get it. And no, I'm not a secret nepo baby. I'm actually not sure if it's possible to be a YouTuber nepo baby. Are the children of family vloggers nepo babies? Are Sprinkle of Glitter's kids gonna be nepo babies? Actually, you know what, that is a lie, because I do actually think Joe Sugg totally got a boost from Zoella being his sister, so maybe people can be YouTuber nepo babies. I understand that these two men are incredibly privileged. I understand that one of them was even born into that privilege, and so many have been afforded so many opportunities before they turned 18 that most people wouldn't get in their entire lives. But I wanted to approach the nepo baby conversation. I wanted to approach the adult actor who can't seem to let his old work go conversation from a different perspective. What if this is more of a curse and works to more of a detriment than we realize? This video may be a little different from my typical style of videos. It's going to be a little bit more of an opinion piece rather than a typical video essay. It'll probably be shorter than my others. Honestly, to be fair, this could have been a podcast episode. The YouTube version of this could have been an email is this could have been a podcast episode. This could have been a tweet. But it's just something that's been playing on my mind. I want to talk a little bit about nepo babies, a little bit about child stars not being able to let their old work go, the nostalgia economy, and just a few bits in between. This isn't the most heavily researched video, but this is more opinionated and just working on some knowledge that's in the backlog. And just before we get into it, I would like to thank NoCD for sponsoring today's video. Imagine a very deeply disturbing thought entering your brain, convincing you that you want to hurt someone that you love. And this doesn't make any sense because you're not a violent person, you'd never hurt anyone, but this thought keeps on coming back. And every time it does, you feel this wave of panic that is so intense that you start questioning whether this thought has any truth to it. And you desperately want this thought to go away, so you do everything in your power to try and alleviate it. You overanalyze every single one of your actions, looking for proof that you are not a bad person. You avoid being alone with the people that you love in case you hurt them. But no matter what you try, that fear, that thought stays in your mind. So you keep doing all these things that your brain is telling you will prevent you from hurting the people around you. And your world just keeps getting smaller and smaller, and you keep isolating yourself more and more. That is what it can be like to struggle with OCD. It's not the hand washing, organization stereotype that we see on the media. This is what it can be like to have real OCD. And OCD is a lot more common than you think. It affects millions of people around the world. You probably know someone who has OCD. I have OCD. The stigma and shame surrounding OCD can make it feel almost too personal and too exposing to talk about. But because OCD is so common and so many people struggle with it, we do need to talk about it. So this OCD Awareness Month, I want to raise awareness for what OCD is actually like beyond the stereotypes. Because once we begin to understand OCD, there's going to be so much less shame and less stigma surrounding the illness. Less shame, less suffering, and more people will be able to get diagnoses and treatments which actually work. OCD is a serious, highly misunderstood condition that traps you in a cycle of distressing, unwanted thoughts and behaviors you do to try and escape the distress those thoughts cause. It targets the things that matter most to you, and it can feel scary, exhausting, and incredibly lonely and isolating. But it doesn't have to stay this way. With the right kind of treatment, OCD can become very manageable. One of those therapies being ERP, which is exposure and response prevention, which has actually been proven to be one of the most effective treatments for OCD. But for the ERP to be done right, you have to work with therapists who have a lot of experience in treating OCD. And that's where NoCD comes in. I want to make it very clear that NoCD is not a service which I've personally used. I've been working with my own therapist for nearly 4 years now. But OCD treatment and partnerships, as someone who has it myself, is something that I do not take lightly. I've heard so many good things and read so many good things about NoCD. They're a very reputable service. NoCD is the world's leading provider of OCD treatment, and all of their licensed therapists specialize in OCD and ERP therapy. You meet with them in live face-to-face virtual sessions. You get support between sessions through the NoCD app, and it's covered by insurance for over 155 million Americans. So if you think you might be struggling with NoCD, please don't wait to get help. Visit nocd.com to book a free call with the team today. That's nocd.com to learn more and get connected with someone who can help today. Thank you so much, NoCD, for sponsoring today's video. NoCD are one of my favorite people to partner with as someone who's had OCD and still has OCD. These partnerships really do mean a lot to me. Thanks, NoCD, for sponsoring, and let's get into it. Before jumping into the Brooklyn Beckham conversation, the Brooklyn Beckham of it all, let's do a little spark note on the nepo baby discourse and why it's so contentious amongst so many people, myself included. For those not in the know, nepo baby is short for nepotism baby, aka someone who's born into a famous family or someone who has at least one parent who is very successful and established in an industry that they want to enter, like singing or acting. And as I was writing this video, I was going to give a few examples of nepo babies, but honestly, guys, especially the film and TV industry is so dominated by nepo babies that there's actually more nepo babies than not. And even if I listed names on names, I really don't think it would portray how much nepo babies dominate these industries. Just know, if you go into your favorite actors Wikipedia and you see at least one of their parents' names in purple, it's over. And there are two factors which I believe are at play when it comes to the disdain and frustration within nepo baby conversations. Number one, as I just mentioned, the fact that they are absolutely everywhere, especially the film and TV industry, which simply highlights how difficult these industries are to crack if you don't have any previous connections. Also, this fact presents a pretty frightening consequence of who is allowed to make art. If only those who are given a chance in the film and TV industry are those with a familial connection, or those who do enter creative industries are paid very little, therefore they are only capable of doing so if they have financial support from their families. Because of this, there is a real growing class divide within creative industries, which severely limits the output of art into the world. When art is only being produced by those from privileged backgrounds, these become the only people who are creating culture. They become the only people who are allowed a voice, pushing those from working class backgrounds farther and farther into society's shadows. Working class people, people from minority ethnic backgrounds are repeatedly silenced by the unfair structures of creative industries. I, like many others, cannot even begin to fathom the amount of undiscovered, untapped talent in the world who just can't break through these impenetrable industry barriers. And the secondary thing which makes nepo baby discourse so frustrating is that when these celebrities are questioned in any capacity about the privilege and the leg up that having a famous or well-known parent has afforded them, very rarely, if ever, do they actually acknowledge their privilege. Most of the time when you see interviews or read interviews, it sounds like they just get very defensive. They either outright deny it, or they even claim that having a famous parent has actually worked to their detriment. I think a lot less people would be exhausted with nepo babies if they actually acknowledged the opportunities that having a famous parent has afforded them. These are two extremely understandable frustrations within nepo baby discourse, and two notions which I do agree with. It sets a very scary precedent that the only people who can create art are people who can afford to, or rather their parents can afford to. So of course, some of the criticism and mockery directed towards Brooklyn Brooklyn Beckham is going to be rooted in this widespread frustration that the general public feel towards those born into extreme privilege, and often their refusal to acknowledge said privilege. But I can't help but feel that the full picture isn't being painted here. Do people dislike Brooklyn Beckham because he's a nepo baby, or do people dislike Brooklyn Beckham because he's not talented or is not perceived as talented? Sorry, I feel so mean for saying that. I think the conversation of who we allow to be a nepo baby is a really interesting one. Nepo babies who seem to get a pass from the public are those who are talented / can hold their own without the fame of their parent. Or nepo babies, this is a lot more of a rare one, who actually acknowledge their privilege and the leg up they've had. And the nepo babies the public tends to turn on the most are the ones that don't have that much talent to carry themselves, but also have the cheek to claim that they've gotten to the position that they have because of their own hard work and merit, not because a production studio gave a fairly untalented actor the lead role because they assumed his name would bring in a large audience and therefore profit. Does Brooklyn Beckham seem to fall into the latter? Is he someone who we don't allow to be a nepo baby? Well, a bit. I think claiming that Brooklyn Beckham is untalented is probably a little bit harsh considering I don't actually know him. It just seems a little mean. We don't do that on the John Theresa channel. The John Theresa podcast, on the other hand, the podcast we get a little bit loose. But like many other nepo babies, Brooklyn Beckham was afforded once in a lifetime opportunities without needing to really prove himself or put in the graft. People clown on Brooklyn Beckham pretty often for changing career paths, and we're going to circle back to that in just a moment, but let's just run through some of these opportunities. First of all, he went to football academy when he was very, very young. I'm pretty sure it was the Arsenal Academy. You're going to have to correct me on that. When he began professional modeling at just 15 years old, he appeared in editorials and on the covers for Vogue China, Miss Vogue, Le Mans Vogue, T, the New York Times Style magazine, and Dazed Korea. And when Brooklyn pursued a career in photography at the age of just 16, he photographed a campaign for Burberry Brit and got accepted into the Parsons School of Design in New York to pursue photography, but dropped out in his first year. When questioned on his privileged roots in 2024, he responded, "I mean, I can't help how I was born. I couldn't ask for better parents, and I'm just trying to work my ass off to trying to make a name for myself. That's all I can say, really." Look, not the best response, but certainly not the worst. So I do find it interesting that out of all nepo babies, the person who seems to get the most smoke is Brooklyn Beckham. And I will say, guys, as I almost get into his defense, or rather try to look at it from a different angle, yes, guys, I'm whipping out my world's smallest violin. He just married into a billionaire family. I'm sure he's going to be okay. This is not particularly an issue which has much urgency or is of the utmost importance, but I just thought it would be interesting to explore the nepo baby conversation from a different angle, and that what if sometimes being a nepo baby can actually work to someone's detriment rather than to someone's advantage. And what I mean by that is that Brooklyn Beckham has had to fail in front of an audience for as long as he can remember. As I just mentioned, what Brooklyn Beckham gets clowned on the most on social media is his constantly changing career paths. He went to football academy as a preteen, pursued modeling at 15, photography at 16, and most recently is pursuing a career in cooking and food-based business endeavors, entrepreneurship. He launched his own cooking series. He also made cooking videos for his social media where he infamously made a bacon sandwich, a cheese toastie, and an omelette. But here sorry, I'm about to be like, but don't we all change career paths at this age? Don't we all change career paths this early in our lives? Don't we fail at multiple career endeavors before deciding which one is right for us? The only difference is that Brooklyn has had to fail in front of an audience of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, because of who his parents are. And another thing about Brooklyn Beckham, and again, I know I've said this so many times in this video, I know we're all whipping out our world's smallest violins, but I do think unless you're born into worldwide fame, we don't really know what it is like to be born famous. Therefore, I mean, in my opinion, if fame is all you know, then pursuing a career in the public eye is what you are going to do. And I think a part of me, I guess, does feel bad for him, even though he does have such a privileged life. But I guess a part of me wonders what it is actually like to only know fame, to only know a career in the public eye and feel like you can only pursue a career in the public eye, and that's what success is. And again, I think what a lot of the frustration from the nepo baby conversation, myself included here, is the fact that every time a nepo baby is undeservedly given a once of a lifetime opportunity, that opportunity is being taken away from someone else. The more chances are being taken on nepo babies, the less are being taken on ordinary but extremely talented individuals who remain undiscovered because of the impenetrable barriers for entry in these prestigious industries. Also, another way Brooklyn and others alike yield privilege is the fact that they can afford to fail because they have family money to fall back on. They can afford to invest time and mostly money into a new hobby and or career and shortly abandon it afterwards. People often cite the Kardashian Jenners for being really savvy businesswomen, and don't get me wrong, they are, but the few successful businesses they do have come after the string of multiple failed ones, unlike those who come from less privileged backgrounds. The Kardashians and Brooklyn Beckham alike, with their family wealth, can just get up and start again. But when it comes to nepo babies like Brooklyn Beckham, I think it would just be interesting to look at it from a slightly different approach. Brooklyn was famous from the day he was born. Public figures do have the option to keep their children's faces and names anonymous. His parents did not do that. And of course, that's afforded him many privileges, like being able to kickstart whichever career he likes. I also think it's worth noting that not just one, but both of his parents have careers in the public eye, which is going to shape what career he wants in the future. Maybe he felt like this is what he was supposed to do, what he was destined to do before considering any other options. I know that a lot of people are going to disagree with me, and honestly, it's fine that this is just like a mini opinion piece, mini essay. Again, his and his parents' fame have afforded him more opportunities than most people will ever get in their lifetimes. Also, his fame probably led him to meet his now wife, and again, he's married into a billionaire family, guys, he'll be fine. But I think something which actually really helped me reframe the way that I looked at Brooklyn Beckham was comparing him to a child of family vloggers. These children are not given the choice. They are thrust into fame whether they like it or not, and all they know is being in the public eye, therefore they're going to pursue a career in the public eye. It's worth asking ourselves, should we extend the same grace that we extend to children of family vloggers to those who are born into famous families? Tom Felton was cast as Draco Malfoy in the Harry Potter series at just 12 years old and was completely skyrocketed into worldwide fame. Similar to many child stars, Tom Felton hasn't quite managed to shake off people seeing him as Draco Malfoy or achieve anywhere near the same success he did when he was a child. I think peaking in your career before the age of 18 is enough to mess with anyone's head, especially because I can imagine that he probably thought this was just the beginning, and perhaps after realizing that he's never going to be able to escape people seeing him as Draco Malfoy, he decided to cash in. Now, I want to make it very clear before getting into this mini Tom Felton discussion is I understand the criticism levied against him when it comes to him still profiting from Harry Potter IP. When asked at the Tony Awards about the controversy surrounding J.K. Rowling,
how does the sort of Twitterverse controversy around J.K. Rowling's views impact you at all, or impact your work on the world at all?
No, I can't say it does. I'm not really that attuned to it. The only thing I always remind myself is that I've been lucky enough to travel the world. Here I am in New York, and I have not seen anything bring the world together more than Potter. And she's responsible for that, so I'm incredibly grateful.
I discussed J.K. Rowling at length in this podcast episode here over on my Substack, but the SparkNotes version is J.K. Rowling is extremely transphobic. One look at her Twitter will show that her just a few concerns has spiraled into a kind of obsessive bigotry that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And her transphobia eerily mirrors homophobia, which was rampant during the 80s and 90s, painting queer people as predators with a particular emphasis on protecting children. And it's been reported that J.K. Rowling has used her own personal wealth, that being from Harry Potter, to found her own transphobic charity. But I can't help but notice a majority of the hate and mockery directed towards Tom Felton has nothing to do with his comments about J.K. Rowling or his ignorance towards her bigotry. It's aimed at the fact that he seemingly hasn't been able to move on from the movie role he had when he was a child. Tom Felton regularly posts about Harry Potter on social media, has made film rewatches, released an autobiography titled Beyond the Wand. He very much took advantage of the Draco Talk hype in 2021, has a Cameo account where he sells Draco Malfoy themed videos, and all of this has amalgamated into Tom being the first of the Harry Potter cast to reprise his role to play Draco Malfoy in The Cursed Child on Broadway. Broadway. I think Tom Felton's career trajectory, one which relies on him repeatedly referencing this one iconic role of his childhood, actually highlights the money-making machine, which is the nostalgia industry. Because let me tell you guys, Tom Felton is probably making bank. His autobiography was #1 on the New York bestseller list, the non-fiction list that is. Cameo is also a huge moneymaker for celebrities, especially those who had one iconic role. Brian Bortgarner, who played Kevin in The Office, is Cameo's biggest earner. He charges $195 for a personal video and has made over $1 million on the platform. Similarly to where we draw the line of who is an acceptable nepo baby versus who isn't, how much is the individual allowed to secure the bag before it's too much?
Jordan from the future here. I think another thing which is important to note is the fact that Tom Felton and other celebrities that cash in on that nostalgia alike are very much a product of our society, one which has such an active and lucrative nostalgia economy. For example, if you think about the child stars that have all made rewatch podcasts, there's the Wizards of Waverly Place rewatch podcast, there's the Ned's Declassified Survival Guide. Did anyone actually watch Ned's Declassified Survival Guide, by the way? It was one of those shows that sort of like gave me the ick, but like I don't know why, it makes me feel so uncomfortable thinking about Ned's Declassified Survival Guide. Anyways, people clown on them, but at the end of the day they are securing the bag from the nostalgia economy, from the nostalgia industry, and if they weren't making any money from this they would not do it. So people like, look, they come for Tom Felton's neck a lot, but at the end of the day Tom Felton and other child stars alike, they are just taking advantage of a very lucrative economy. And again, it sort of circles back to my point to how much is too much of securing the bag
before people begin to turn on them, because many people would argue that Tom Felton is just taking advantage of his one iconic role and milking it for all it's worth, especially because he's probably making bank, so the demand is there. Does the issue lie in the fact that it's cringe? Does the issue lie in the fact that we feel very uncomfortable when we see people trying too hard, particularly when we see men trying too hard? Again, I want to circle this back to what I'm talking about, which is my new named phenomenon, which is the curse of visible irrelevance. This concept maybe relates a little less to Tom Felton because he's someone who's actively attaching himself to the one project which made him famous as a child. But firstly, he gave a fair shot at acting outside of Harry Potter projects with pretty little success. And again, he had to fail in front of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, because of the visibility which was thrust on him from an acting job he took when he was 12 years old. Once again, maybe we should look at Tom Felton similarly to how we look at the children of family vloggers, someone who is thrust into the spotlight by their parents without knowing the true consequences. And another aspect of this conversation I find really interesting is what child stars we extend grace to. It's become pretty common sentiment now that child stars and the acting industry for children is brutal. It chews children up, it spits them out. They are thrust into a life of potentially worldwide fame and riches with very little supervision. And as soon as these children begin to have problems related to their lifestyle, whether that is addiction or mental health issues, the production companies, agents, they turn their backs on them because they can't milk them for any more cash. It's interesting that the cutthroat nature of this industry, and particularly how it has a detrimental impact on children, is pretty well known. Yet we can't extend any grace to ex-child stars because they're being too cringe. I don't know, I think the way that people talk about Tom Felton sometimes is outside of the very understandable criticism is insane. Like, I watched a video essay the other day and someone was just absolutely ripping into him and I actually just thought it was too much.
To conclude, I know that so many people are going to think that this is so silly goofy. I know so many people are going to think that this is absurd and none of you agree with me. And honestly, you're totally in your right to. Again, this was just an opinion piece, a very light video. But to conclude, like, you know, at the end of the day, they're two very privileged people. One of them is actively securing the bag through the nostalgia economy. The other has married into a billionaire family. These men are going to be fine. But I just thought it would be interesting to look at child star fame and nepotism from a different angle, as something which is actually thrust upon these people rather than something that they truly wished for. And of course they, you know, really benefit a lot from it, especially financially. But it's one of those things where, was it worth it considering how widely mocked they are online? Is the curse of visible irrelevance a real thing? Should everyone be able to be afforded the opportunity to fail in private and to test things out in private rather than doing it all publicly, just because their parents are famous or just because they were cast in a very very, very famous franchise at the age of 12. But yes, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I actually really enjoyed making these shorter videos. So if you guys do want more of these, I'll definitely do more of these in the future. But if you do want more content from me, I do have a podcast, Voice Notes with John and Theresa, where we do very laid back cultural commentary, pretty similar to this video. So if you found yourself enjoying this video and wanting a bit more of this, make sure you go check out my podcast. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you soon. Bye.